We're in the middle of political season in America, just a couple of weeks before the election now. And the other day at one of the political rallies that one of the candidates was holding, she was extolling the virtues of abortion. And as she did so, there was a small group of pro-life people at her rally protesting their views on abortion. And one of them hollered out, "Jesus is Lord." And when he did so, this drew the candidate's attention to them, and she looked over and she said, "Oh, you're at the wrong rally." And her crowd just roared with delight. Well, this emboldened her to start laughing and to start mocking them without mercy, letting them know they didn't belong there at all. There's something within this that I believe we need to be thinking about. Of course, she was wrong in mocking people who would stand for the sanctity of life. But she was right about this. They were at the wrong rally. Now, of course, they knew they were. That's why they were there, was to protest these views that some people have that killing a baby prior to birth is okay. But this idea of are we at the wrong rally is something that I think all Christians need to be thinking about. Because there are times where I believe we have gotten to the point where we think it's so important to get along with people that we actually start to compromise with sin. But this is something God does not permit. In Proverbs, the 29th chapter, in verse 27, he had the writer pen these words: "The righteous detest the dishonest, and the wicked detest the upright." There is a fact in life that God recognizes, that the righteous and the unrighteous cannot coexist when one or the other is exercising their righteousness or their unrighteousness. Because the unrighteous will not tolerate righteousness in their present, nor should the righteous tolerate unrighteousness in theirs. And yet we've come to the point in our modern day society where I believe Christians think that compromise is good. And of course, if we're talking about compromise in physical, non-consequential things, then of course compromising with one another is good. You can have different viewpoints on how open our borders should be. You can have different viewpoints as to how much assistance the government should give its people. You can have different viewpoints even on things of whether or not we should be going to war under certain circumstances or not. But if you as a Christian think that you can compromise with sin, that you can say, okay, you can sin this far but no more, then we have to understand that we are engaging in sin in ourselves at this time, that this is something God has forbidden. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul writes something through inspiration that all of us need to think about. He says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common?" Think about that. What do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Well, the fact is they're polar opposites. He goes on to say this: "What fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial?" It's talking about Satan and his followers. What harmony have Christ and Belial? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? Well, he goes on, but we can see the point, can't we? We are not to be associating closely with sinful people when they are involved in that sin. We have a strong desire as Americans to maintain the United States of America. This is a good desire. But if in order to remain united, we have to compromise with sin, we have to understand this is not something that God will permit, nor was it anything that the founders had in mind when they were trying to get a United States of America. Remember, the founders founded this nation on godly principles. And they felt that the only way this nation was going to be able to run and continue successfully was if we were one nation that was united under God and His principles. Anything short of that, we had no basis for even being a nation, much less a united nation. In modern times, Christians have desired a unified church, a wonderful desire, something that God desires as well, something that Christ wants. Remember, Christ died for His body, the church. He just had one body, just one church. The church needs to be unified. But what happens when the Christians within that church start disagreeing on whether sin is sin or not? What happens when we start compromising in the areas of sexual immorality, in the areas of perversion, and even in the areas of taking the most innocent of lives? Do you think that this type of unity is something that God desires? A compromise with the truth? Because one thing God has always required is that we be united with His commandments. If I agree with His commandments and you agree with His commandments, then we have a point of unity. Otherwise, there's no basis for that. And very often in our modern day society, Christians believe that they can actually give an unspoken but tacit approval of sin just so that we can remain together. God doesn't permit that. Now, of course, we're to love sinners, are we not? We're told that we are to love those who hate us and to pray for those who persecute us. We do have an obligation to go to those who are sinning and try and get them to repent. But we cannot compromise with them in that attempt. We cannot say, okay, you can kill your unborn babies, but you can only do it this long, and then you can't do that anymore. Yeah, and God is pleased with that type of a compromise? We don't do that. We can't say, okay, you can commit sexual immorality, but not adultery. You can't do that. Sexual immorality is sexual immorality. Perversion is perversion. And we cannot compromise on these things. And it's important for Christians to understand that now. We don't want to go before God on our knees at the judgment someday and find out that we've been at the wrong rally. We do need to take stands. They need to be righteous and loving stands, but they need to be stands. And this idea that somehow we can compromise with wickedness in order to remain united is a principle that we need to disabuse ourselves of. We need to take a stand for righteousness. Barring that, we have no source, no basis for unity. Are you at the right rally? Or maybe you're finding yourself at the wrong rally. If so, maybe it's time to leave, and it's time to do something along the lines of seeking unity in God's way, rather than in the way of compromising with wickedness. Something to think about. Shorter video today, but hopefully something that will give you something to consider and maybe something to be praying about and then something to be acting upon. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.